Well, it's actually 4:31, so we'll go ahead and get this meeting started. Julie, would you call the roll, please?
Oops. Hold on 1 second, I threw my paper. Member Barnett. Absent. Member Metzger.
Yes.
Member Martin.
Yes.
Member Went.
Yes.
Member Woolrath.
Here.
Member Erickson.
Yes.
And Chairman Solner.
Here. Okay, we have, it looks like Mr. Barnett's trying. There he is. All right. So we do have all members. First item is approval of the February 13, 2020 minutes. I would entertain a motion for that. Member Metzger, second. Member Wynn. Any questions or discussion? If not, we'll have a roll call vote.
Member Barnett.
Yes.
Member Metzger.
Yes.
Member Martin.
Yes.
Member Went.
Yes.
Member Woolrath.
Yes.
Member Erickson.
Yes.
Chairman Solner.
Yes. Okay. Next item is appearances by member of the public. I believe we have at least one person to do that. Julie, you want to introduce them, or how do we normally do that?
If I may, Chairman Soldner, this is Camille. I want to update the membership that our Information Technologies Department has found a way to bring our public speakers in via telephone. So you will see an individual on the squares here that is clearly not one of our members, but a community member who has requested to speak through our formal process. And going forward, we feel that this will really help promote health and safety and allow, obviously, the public to express themselves without us having to read their comments. We enjoy being of service to the public, but we know they love to read their own comments too. So with that said, I know that we have Mrs. Carla Bailey Smith present, and I will be timing this. Ms. Morlock, I believe that there is a time limit to this. Will you remind me of the what I should set my timer at?
It's 5 minutes.
5 minutes. And so once you start, Ms. Bailey Smith, I will set that timer. And unfortunately, I will have to stop you if you go beyond the 5. So Ms.
Okay.
Smith, welcome to the Rules Subcommittee of the Executive Committee of the McLean County Board.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me all right? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Thank
I can
you.
be heard. Okay. Yeah, I don't have any feedback that I can hear. Okay. To the McLean County Board Rules Committee regarding redistricting. I'm taking time to speak to you today about the upcoming redistricting opportunity we have at the county level. I understand that some suggestions have been made to change how the county board districts are done, and that those ideas include board members at large or dividing the county into 4 districts. I am urging you to maintain separate county board districts similar to what we have now, because the needs and interests of our various neighborhoods, our 2 downtowns, our 2 universities, and our rural towns are all very different. Once we have the necessary census data to divide districts by population, please look in particular at County Board District 9. I do not know who is responsible for the shape of that district, but it is a perfect example of gerrymandering. It divides neighborhoods, takes in narrow slices here and there, and it even has holes in it. We should be striving to keep representation of neighborhoods and municipalities cohesive. It is bad enough that our state and federal representation carves up Bloomington Normal, which dilutes the voice we have and the power of our representation. Let's do better for the residents of McLean County and use natural geographical boundaries, precinct boundaries, and municipality boundaries, as proponents of fair maps have long advocated for. Let's model here in McLean County what we want from our state legislature and show the rest of Illinois that we are capable of creating fair maps and amplifying the needs and voices of our residents by honoring the natural boundaries of our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor walked through and didn't see anyone. I don't know that we've gotten any other calls. It doesn't seem like there is anyone else on the screen. We did have requests for a second person, but Julie, have you heard any more from them?
In my last communication, Chairman Soldner, with Julie, she had not heard from them. Oh, Julie's back now. I apologize. I thought she might have stepped away.
No, I was actually going back over to my other screen to double check the email again one last time, and I have not received anything.
Okay. All right. Well, then we will continue on. I met with Mr. Spanos prior to the meeting, and we discussed a little bit. We do have a number of items to look at tonight, and it's pretty obvious to me that we are going to need a second meeting to get our work done. So with your permission, what I'd like to do tonight is more or less have more of a work session than a regular action item voting meeting, because again, we don't have specific items listed on our agenda to vote for item A, B, or C. So what I'd like to do is have more of a work session so we can come up with the final language. And then at our next meeting, hopefully within the next couple weeks, we'll have an actual item that we can make a motion, a second, discuss, and vote on. So if there is no objections, that's what I would prefer to do. So with that, then we'll go ahead and start. I don't know, Ms. Rodriguez, do you have anything you would like to open the meeting up with, or can we just go ahead and start with the requests?
I think no, thank you, Chairman Soldner. I look forward to working with the committee this evening, and as the requests were noted on the memo that I provided you last night, I just say we go through those. Mr. Spanos is here to help guide us relative to what can and should be in a rule book, and we'll just go from there. So I'll let you lead, sir. It looks like Member Woolrab has a question.
Okay. Member Woolrab?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm kind of confused at what you were just saying, that we're going to have a work session. I was just looking at the agenda, going back over it, and it does say that items presented for action, review and consider adopting amendments to Chapter 20, so kind of board rules to be distributed, which I assume were what we got in the email from Ms. Rodriguez. So I'm surprised that we're not actually going to be voting.
Well, again, I think a lot of this was so that we could have a more concise items, because I believe some of this, there may be some language change. In fact, I know I spoke to one member that had a couple things he wanted to change. So what I'd like to do, if we get our work done and we're ready to vote on an item, I suppose I'm not opposed to that, but I would like to go through all the items first, give the authors an opportunity to explain their requests, and then probably hold the discussion down to just more getting the information. And then next meeting, when we have an actual item, we can do a motion, a second, and then do the discussion and the deliberation. So,
Chairman,
yes.
This is George. I did not get an email, or I do not have it with that information.
Okay.
And so I would like to get that email so I know what we're talking about.
Okay. Well, that's just another good reason why we should probably.
Why we need to, just present whatever, and we can make changes and study it for next week or next month. Okay.
So Member Woolrab and Member Barnett, both members of this committee, have put forward requests for changes or additions. Member Johnston did also, and that's why I've invited her to sit in with this meeting, specifically to help explain her requests. So Mr. Spanos or anyone else?
I would just add that if it's going to be a work session, there's not going to be a motion to approve in a second and then a discussion about a specific item. I think that what I would recommend then is that the conversation, Ms. Johnson, Ms. Wolrab, Mr. Barnett, those of you who have made rules proposals, to explain the proposals and questions to them about clarification and that sort of thing is fine. But as far as a discussion on the merits or whether or not there's a disagreement on that particular rule, probably should not be taking place unless there's a motion on the floor. That would be something that once this committee agrees on how to proceed, we can then recess or adjourn, and either way, and then present you with a new agenda with each of the items that would be discussed and voted on, itemized on that agenda. And then you would have a motion, a second, and then a discussion about the specific merits of that particular proposal, and then a vote on whether or not to make a recommendation to the executive committee as to whether or not that rule should be changed.
And then that also gives the public specific rule changes that we're going to make and the language in the agenda. So they have an opportunity to comment on that also.
Correct.
Okay. So with that then, George, unfortunately, you don't have a copy of this, but I'm going to go through the email that was sent to us by administration. If you recall, the part that is written in red, first one would be on page 2, is the proposed amendment. And what's the preface? Should I go ahead and read it? Is that what you, or should I have the person making the motion read it? What would you suggest? All right, well, I'll just read it then. So this is under 20-2 board districts. Letter A, the board will hold public hearings on a decennial basis prior to final adoption of the redistricting process. Public notice shall include the time and place of the hearing and shall state the place where a copy of the proposed redistricting plan is available for public inspection. The next item then is B, the board will adhere to best practices in the decennial redistricting, planning to ensure accurate representation of McLean County residents. Districts shall be substantially equal in population to each other district and comprised of contiguous territory as nearly compact as practicable. The redistricting plan shall comply with the United States Constitution, any federal law regarding redistricting, including but not limited to the Federal Voting Rights Act, the Illinois Constitution, and the Illinois Counties Code. The redistricting plan shall be drawn to the extent practicable and subject to federal and state laws to create crossover districts, coalition districts, or influence districts as defined by the Illinois Voting Rights Act of 2011. And so I will ask Member Johnson to just make a comment or kind of explain where she's coming from with this.
Thank you, Member Soldner, or Chairman Soldner. Sorry about that. I have been in conversations with different groups in town. Everybody is very much in favor of having this be an open process where they can give us some feedback, because this is a big decision, probably one of the bigger decisions that we make as a county board. And so both of these proposals are really about opening up and ensuring transparency to the public.
Okay. I'm going to ask Mr. Spanos if you would kind of give us the state statute on the redistricting.
It's a good thing I printed this because I wouldn't remember it all. It's let's see. It's reapportionment under the state code. We all like to call it redistricting and other things, but state code calls it reapportionment. And it provides a specific process by which a county is to engage in reapportioning its districts. And it requires or provides that the county board chairman shall present to the board a proposed redistricting plan, that plan would be submitted to the board by May 19th, and that the plan must be approved and in place prior to July 1st. The difficulties obviously that we're facing is the delay in the census. The material or the information from the census isn't supposed to be available until June, which is after the May 19th statutory requirement for presentation of the proposal. I don't have any specific information that there's going to be any sort of change, although I've heard some discussion that those deadlines may be pushed back some. Obviously, what you're up against is the election next year and the filing deadlines that go along with that. But my guess is that with the census data not being available, they're going to have to come up with either some other source of those numbers, it seems unlikely, or a compressed schedule with respect to the filing deadlines or the passage deadlines, if you will, both.
Okay. All right. Well, as I mentioned, we're going to do our deliberation more specifically at the next meeting, but I would be glad to ask if any members have any questions of Ms. Johnston. All right. Ms. Johnston, you got anything else you want to say?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to bring this up. And I am very interested in having this kind of process codified so that it is easily accessible for members of the board, members of the public to understand what our process is. If there's some way we wanted to include what Mr. Spanos just referenced, regarding like the dates for submission, the dates for approval, I'd be open to including that in the rule change. Thank you.
All right. Member Barnett first, and then Member Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I'm looking through the language that's been submitted here. I mean, maybe not these exact words, but at least the practices that are here, districts being equal, as far as population goes, and then things like following the Voting Rights Act, the Illinois Constitution, the Illinois Counties Code. I mean, we kind of already have to do that stuff anyway, right? I guess my thought would be that, we're just kind of probably putting into print, what's already been done in the past anyway with this proposal, is I guess what I'm thinking. Thank you.
Member Webb?
I move that we adjourn this meeting until next month.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to adjourn. Is there a second? Is there a second? All right, one more time, second to the motion. All right, well, unfortunately, Mr. Witt, your motion fails for a lack of second. All right, well then, with that, we are ready to move on to the next requested change or addition. If we go to page, it's back a ways here. Looks like on page 7. And it's the letter E with underneath meetings. This is submitted by Member Barnett. There's a paragraph under resolutions that's stricken. And then what's added is any countywide elected official or appointed official who desires to present a report or communication to their oversight committee or the full board shall deliver a copy of the same to the administrator at least 5 business days before the scheduled meeting where the report of the communication would be presented. Then the second item of that is any board member who wishes to deliver a communication to a committee or to the full board may do so as part of the standard meeting agenda under other business and communications. Then thirdly, any board member who wishes to deliver a report to a committee or the full board shall submit their request to do so, and a copy of the same to the committee chairperson. if applicable, or county board chairperson, if full board, and the administrator at least 7 business days before the scheduled meeting where the report will be presented. So, Mr. Barnett, I'd like for you to lead the discussion on this.
Sure. If I had known you were going to have to read all these out loud, I probably wouldn't have typed so much text. Sorry about that.
You get paid by the word.
Yeah. Okay. So what's on page 7, 7 and 8? I mean, they really flow into also what's on page 9 under K that I'm proposing adding in. And there's a couple things in here that discovered were typos or came across not as was intended in this original draft, and I'm happy to point those out to the committee. I'd chalk them more up to Scrivener's errors than anything else. So in general, Mr. Chairman, do you mind if we go ahead and go through K?
No problem. I should have read that. It was on the next page. So I'll go ahead and read that. K is resolutions and ordinances. Any countywide elected official or appointed official who desires to present any resolution or ordinance shall submit a copy of the same to the administrator at least 5 business days prior to the meeting of their oversight committee or full board meeting. Resolutions and ordinances shall pertain to the normal course of day-to-day operations of their office or department. It shall include a cover memo from said official explaining the need for said resolution or ordinance, impact on county operations, financial or budgetary implications, and any other pertinent information. And then 2 for K is any committee chair who desires to present any resolution or ordinance shall submit a copy to the same to the administrator and state's attorney at least 5 business days prior to the meeting of their committee or full board meeting. The administrator shall prepare a cover memo to accompany said resolution or ordinance that outlines the proposal's impact on county operations, financial or budgetary implications, conflicts with existing county board rules, McLean County ordinances, and state statutes, or any other pertinent information. And then number 3 is resolutions of congratulation as outlined in section 2011 are exempt. All right. More reading.
Yeah, sorry about that. So in general, what's the problem that I'm trying to solve? Well, when we have ordinances and resolutions come forward, either through committees, even up to exec committee or the full board, we seem to spend a lot of time at meetings when these things come forward talking about, well, how is this going to impact what goes on in that department or within county operations in some way? Are we going to have to move budget money around? Is there any kind of financial implication of this at all? Are we going to have to move money from here to here to make it happen? And then, there's the random thing where someone says, well, I thought we couldn't do that because I thought county code said this and not that, and we end up a lot of times having these conversations, and those are all good questions to ask, right? But we end up having these conversations that are like sometimes 20 and 30 minutes long that I believe could easily be answered if a proper memo was written and accompanied this ahead of time. So if there was a memo coming from that department head or from administration that detailed things like that we could easily read through, I think it would help for a better process, right, at the board meetings, and also maybe help save us some time and also give us better insight heading into the meeting. So maybe we're asking more deeper, more thoughtful questions about the items that are being brought forward. Now, sometimes when items come forward, there are memos, right, that are attached to them, but they're not always super thorough when they're brought forward. So this was an attempt to try to outline at least a high level, like some basic things that should be in there and be covered. And when I started to approach this, the reason there's an item K on there, it really kind of struck me that, reports and communications, those things are, kind of germane, right? They're not really, they're pretty vanilla as far as the information that's coming forward to the committee or to the full board. So it probably would make sense, I thought, to separate those out. So I left those in E And then the items about ordinances and resolutions, I move that down to a newsletter in item K. Two things I'd like to point out, if I may. In item E, top of page 8, number 2, where it says any board member who wishes to deliver a communication to a committee, that should say, and this is one of those errors I mentioned, that should say any board member who wishes to deliver a communication to their assigned committees.
All right.
And then the other error, and I'm going to give props to Member Erickson for pointing this out to me, because it was certainly not my intention when I had drafted this for the language to appear like this. I think on page 9, under K, number 2, page 9, K2, where it says any committee chair who desires to present a resolution or ordinance, that should be any board member, not any committee chair. My intention was not to restrict that just to committee chairs. That should be any board member who wants to present a resolution or ordinance.
All right. Well, I have a question on right off. The number 5 days, is that to allow time for administration to get that information gathered out into the members so that we can glean it, or where did you come up with that number, I guess is my question.
Well, it's currently written that 6 days are required, and I was trying to make that a little bit less burdensome, so I shortened it to 5.
Okay.
And why it is currently 6 days, I don't know.
Okay. I have a question for Ms. Rodriguez, if I might. Do you see an issue with a resolution or ordinance or whatever coming up after the 5 days? In other words, do you ever see it happening the day before, or actually it's got to be 48 hours because of agenda? Do you ever find a time when it's a short notice that you barely make the agenda cutoff?
Actually, our rules do state 6 days, so I say no.
Okay. Okay.
I have had it, I have had timelines, run up against that, but I go back to the rules in that particular situation or in that particular part of rules, and I have had to tell members no, that they would have to wait until the next cycle. Now, if it's not on this, and let's say it's a budget resolution that a department head brings to me, and it's not enough time to publish the agenda, I still unfortunately have to say no. But then if it's an urgent issue, I do have to approach the chair of the committee and request a stand-up committee of the county board. And if you remember, a little over a year ago, there were so many instances where we had to have stand-ups to address late submission or whatever the case may be. There were multiple issues, and this board, not this particular committee, but the board in general, really urged county administration to work hard on cleaning up that issue. And so we try anymore to really encourage department heads to be timely, to communicate with them about what's up and coming that we see, so that we avoid stand-up committees of the county board. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that answers completely. Member Barnett, did you have anything else or anything to add?
No, not really. That's kind of the general idea.
All right.
But I'm happy to answer any questions or something
Right.
I have.
Member Erickson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would probably suggest that maybe we define maybe 5 business days prior to the meeting. For example, if the meeting is on Thursday, does 5 business days prior to the meeting mean that you count Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, Friday, and Thursday? Is the day of submission count as 1 business day? Whenever I have submitted anything, I always counted the last day as being the day before the meeting. But I mean, I suppose that could be an issue at some point if someone wanted to get something submitted. And instead of having to argue about that at some board hearing, what 5 business days prior to the meeting means, we might want to give that a more clear and definite definition, so we know exactly what it is.
Right?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, very good. Any other questions for Member Barnett? Member Wolrab?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it looks to me like the countywide elected officials or appointed officials, they have a 5-day requirement, but the board members have a 7-day. Is that, I'm correct about that? And then if so, what's the reason for the differentiation?
So you're underneath the reports and communications section.
On E. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The only reason I guess I did that was mainly because I guess I thought if a board member is going to come forward and deliver a report on something, and I don't even know what that would look like. I can't remember a time that anyone's done that since I've been on the board. But if a countywide elected official or a department head, right, like they're already on staff and they're at the county every day, they have access to the resources they need to be able to do that within 5 days. I thought if there was a board member who needed to do that, maybe it'd take a couple extra days to get, email their PowerPoint in or, make sure it worked with IT or they had all their needs figured out, which might be more taxing and take longer because they're not working on the county campus every day. But I'm not opposed to changing that to 5 so it's consistent. But that I guess is what my thought was.
It just seems like for simplicity, it would be nice to have it all the same. Which way, I don't know, but and rather than having to parse through which is which and remember that.
Well, I will leave it up to Mr. Barnett, I guess, Member Barnett to decide on that. And then when we,
that's fine.
Our regular voting meeting, if we need to amend it or whatever, we can. All right. Any other questions for Member Barnett? Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on then.
Thank you.
Next item is under 2012, page 9. B, it's the word invocation is stricken and it's moment of silent prayer. And this is submitted by Member Wolrab. So Member Wolrab, would you like to lead us on this?
I would, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. I did a little bit of research on this and found that there are among county governments and our local governments, there are just different ways of starting a meeting. I will say that everybody seems to have a pledge like we do, but after that, it does vary in that slot where we have invocations. And it really runs the gamut from what we do to I think in DuPage County, they invite in different members of clergy from, ranging from various Christian clergy to Jewish rabbis and people from the Islamic Center there. And then Bloomington has this silent prayer, just as I have submitted, and Normal has nothing in that slot. So it's really, there's a gamut out there. And I want to say that I really feel like this time that we take is really a nice separation from the activities that we may have been doing right prior to the meeting, whether we've been grocery shopping or taking care of kids or working, whatever it is. It just gives us a few minutes to settle in and think about the important business we have ahead of us. So I really like the idea of having something in this slot. That being said, I guess I want a little bit of personal comment here about, I personally feel that prayer is a very personal thing. Sometimes we may go to other institutions of other religions, maybe because we've been invited to a wedding or a funeral, to attend a funeral or something. And there we're very, cautious, circumspect, respectful, but it's something we've chosen to do, to go to these other institutions and partake in those services at the time. But generally speaking, I think prayer is a personal thing, and we've all, most of us have been raised with a very specific way or thought about that, and quite honestly, those tend to not overlap sometimes between them, and even they're in conflict with each other. So I think that sometimes this can raise tensions rather than calming and focusing our attention. So I think we should examine, what we need to do is examine why we're here, really, and what we're about. And I'd say as leaders in our community, what we're about is trying to do the best we can for our community and bringing people together to work together. What we have in this community is a wealth of businesses, healthcare facilities, education, people who need to work together, and also for the prosperity of the community. We have large employers that we have worked really hard to bring here, and they have a need for a lot of new employees that they'll be bringing in because they can't always recruit locally from many different places, and they may be of many different backgrounds. And I think we also, one thing we've heard many times as an example of this that we've all talked about, most likely everybody in here has heard one time or another, the difficulty in recruiting psychiatrists, for example. So in the healthcare field, it's not always easy to recruit people. That being said, I think what we could do to help encourage a community where people can work together without that tension toward the prosperity and health and well-being of everybody is to just tone down everything and keep it like very personal and very private that way. And that's one of the reasons I have put this forward, so that we're just in a calm mode and in a thoughtful mode and a respectful mode, and you change it to this silent prayer.
All right. Any questions for Member Wolrab? It's very succinct. I do appreciate that. Unless you have another comment, we will consider it for our next meeting and we'll move on. Thank you very much. Okay, the next change that I see, unless I missed one, it was on page 12. It's under letter G, and it's G, and it deals with public comments, response to agenda items, and submitted to the board or any standing committee within the established timeline will be furnished to members of the board in hard copy and or electronic mail prior to the meeting, and this is submitted by Member Johnston. Member Johnston, would you like to comment on this?
Actually, I would, with the changes that are going on this week, so that people can make public comments either calling in or in person, so that there's no more written statements. I see no more need for this rule, so I'd be happy to withdraw it at this point.
Okay. Parliamentarian, is there anything we need to do? If the writer requests to withdraw it, that's all we need?
We'll just remove it from the next agenda.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Okay, I go to page 17, I believe is the next one. It's letter V towards the top of the middle of the page. To hold a public hearing on an annual basis prior to final adoption of the capital improvement plan. Public notice shall include the time and place of the hearing and shall state the place where a copy of the proposed capital improvement plan is available for public inspection. Next one goes along with it. To hold a public hearing on an annual basis prior to a final adoption of the annual budget. Public notice shall include the time and place of the hearing and shall state the place where a copy of the proposed annual budget is available for public inspection. The notice shall also include the following statement printed in 11-point bold-faced type. The property tax millage rate proposed to be levied to support the proposed budget will be a subject of this hearing. And those were submitted by Member Johnston. So I'd like for you to comment on those if you would.
Thank you. I feel like that we spend a lot of time when we talk about kind of capital improvement and where money is going and where we spend money. We do talk about being accountable to the residents. We want to make sure that we are good stewards of money. And I think that this again just moves us forward into the transparency and giving people an opportunity to comment on how we are being stewards of their money, how we're using that. And I think that both for the capital improvement and for the budget, it would be nice to have feedback. We pass those about as far away from elections as possible. And so I think it's a good idea to get the public's opinion and give them an opportunity to give some feedback prior to adopting those budgets. So
All right.
Questions.
Any questions from any member? I was going to ask either Administration Kathy, would you like to make a comment?
I would, if I may. Thank you for this agenda item, Member Johnston. I too am very interested in process and making sure that those processes are clear. And so in our, as you know, Kathy Dreyer and I have a very integral part in the budget. And so just wanted to be clear, when we're preparing the budget, we present that to the board as a whole. And then each of those budgets for each oversight committee are presented to the oversight committee with presentations from department heads on changes within those budgets. And then that is reintroduced for acceptance and vote to approve the final budget in November. So my question to you is, how do you envision this public hearing being different or more accessible to the public? And what would you recommend for that process to look different? I guess part of my question is, where would you envision this meeting being so it doesn't slow down the adoption of the budget? Mm-hmm. And how do you see it being different?
What I think one of the things that concerns me is that a lot of times it is folded just into a general meeting, and that it can be easily overlooked. And so if you would prefer, rather than having a kind of comprehensive meeting, I mean, I'd be open to the idea of making sure that it is published, that we are looking at what would influence the final levy, right? But what I would like to do is just try to make sure that we are putting out there, if you have comments about budget, this is when we would like to see them, right? When we're looking at it as a whole.
And if Ms. Taylor doesn't mind me interjecting just briefly, Ms. Johnston should know that when she provided her recommendations to me, I did not consult with her, but I was the one that placed this in the area of the executive committee in advance of talking with staff, because I also was thinking about process. Once it gets to executive committee, at least county administration feels like we're almost done with the marathon, that when the full budget, after all of those committee meetings, after all of the recommended changes made by committee members to administration, to go back to a department head, to then bring it back to the committee again, after all that has happened, it comes to exec. And so I just wanted to set that piece of the table as well, to let the membership know, and Ms. Johnston know, Member Johnston, that that's why I placed it there. But Ms. Taylor brings up a very good point. All of those meetings that we have prior to executive, which with each oversight, are posted for budget. And so I think that is why, part and parcel about why Ms. Taylor is asking about process, because as you know, this goes on for months. I mean, next month, county administration brings forward the budget policy next month to be recommended to be passed by the board. So it is a very lengthy process, and we're wondering in your mind's eye, where does this fit in properly based on the also requisite timelines to us working with our tax levy and filing that with the proper, in the proper way at the right time. And Ms. Taylor can articulate that as well. Thank you, Ms. Taylor.
So if you remember last month, I believe, or maybe it was a month before, we held a public hearing prior to the meeting dealing with the show bus.
Right.
So, you know, so I'm referencing that, I guess, if I looked how that would work with the budget. So if we did that in our November meeting and there were members of the public that could convince members of the board that we wanted to spend more on highways or less on highways or whatever, it came up with some kind of suggestion, then it would really be too late at that meeting to send that on. So that budget hearing meeting would have to be well before that, like in maybe September or whatever. And even at that time, I'm not sure we have enough information. I know you got the budget work done, but it hasn't went to all the committees maybe yet. So, so I guess timing might be an issue.
Well, and I guess that goes back to process. So if we're just wanting to make sure that the public is informed that we are discussing budget, we could hold a public, or we could post it in the paper or hold it like a public hearing where we give an opportunity for comments. But that is already available at any county board or committee meeting. So I guess I just wanted a greater explanation of what the expectations were.
Sure. I think that there's really no great way to have, I mean, how do we get feedback on sort of amorphous what the budget might look like in the next coming year, what you guys are going to be working on. Once it's sort of in that finalized state and we are getting ready to approve it, you can kind of get a better picture of it as a whole versus in these kind of meetings, it's sort of piecemeal. What I think, it wasn't so much that the public comment would kind of stop the budget where it is, but it would give the public a chance to give us some feedback so that as we begin the budgeting process immediately, the cycle immediately coming, that we can start that process of making adjustments if the board so feels, right? If they feel that it's necessary based on the public comment, that we move forward. Because if we try to have public hearings, I mean, I suppose we could try to do it right after the board votes on the budget as to what it looks like in the past year and what we want it to look like in the coming year. But I think that it's just such a big budget. It's hard to get a comprehensive view if we're not looking at it as a comprehensive presentation.
Member Went had his hand up first, and then Member Woolram.
Well, listen, the public has the right to come to any of our committee meetings, and when we were discussing the budget and stuff, and I think that it is sufficient. What we do now is that they can come to any meeting and they can get a hold of their county board members and discuss anything with the budget. But I think to then have a public hearing is just not going to work out very well. I think that's just my opinion.
All right. Member Woolram?
Well, I see that as Ms. Rodriguez has placed this under executive committee, if the public hearing were held at the executive committee right prior to final adoption in our main meeting of that month, I mean, would that make sense? I mean, we're right on the edge there of approval, and I think anything that, if we had, 20 people show up and they all asked for something very specific, we could make, the executive committee could make the change at that point, or it could be made at the full board meeting immediately followed. Would that make sense to you, Ms. Johnson? Sorry.
And I'm open to that as well. I mean, I think that anything that we can do to ensure that the public feels that the trust is there, that they can see what we're doing, that they can understand the process. Anything that we can do to help them understand the process, I think would be a good step forward.
I wonder, Ms. Rodriguez, if you could maybe poll some of your other administrator friends in other counties to see if they have a process where they do this. It would kind of give us some insight to how it would work.
I'd be happy to do that, Chairman. I also know that Assistant County Administrator Dreyer and Ms. Taylor of the same title have been working on some public-facing brochures that we would we intend to post on our website that show the public in very easy to read terms, pictures and pie charts of where the budget goes and how it's spent. We also know that our own auditor, Michelle Anderson, makes a PAFR. So there's a CAFR and a PAFR, and the PAFR is the public-facing explanation of the annual financials of the county, and so those are available too. Now, that is not mitigating Ms. Johnston's request for the public to make comment. The only thing I would say is it would have to be an expectation-setting exercise to me with the public. In public comment, it wouldn't mean change. Because if the change or the budget is delayed in any way in those 2.5 days between executive committee on a Monday and county board on a Thursday in November, it does really delay county administration's ability then to complete any of the requisite actions we need to do to file what our levies are. So in that sense, I know that there are other things involved with public hearings, like publishing and a certain amount of time to publish and a cost to publish. And we could also go, Chairman Soldner, back to the table and put all of that down so that we can discuss it next time. Thank you.
Okay. Member Walrab, do you have your hand up?
I did. So I throw out another completely different timeline for this would be, since we'll be starting budget talks real soon here in the next month, as you said, Ms. Rodriguez. Maybe the time to get the input, so it could be anything critical could be brought into the budget, would be about this time in the year. And if we specifically want public input, let's do it ahead of time at the beginning of the process.
Okay. Any other questions for Member Johnston? Okay, thank you very much. Unless I missed something, I don't see anything else in our actual document here. I do know there's some things that administration would like to discuss. So, Member Barnett, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. As we were sitting here talking about Member Johnson's proposals that are on page 17, I searched through the rules, because right underneath of her proposal, there's a 2-bullet description there of the Liquor Control Commission, a 2-bullet description of this committee, the Rules Subcommittee. But I can't find anywhere in the county board rules where there's like a 2-bullet description of the legislative subcommittee that we have. It's mentioned in a general paragraph on page 14, talking about the executive committee, but I think a description like what exists for the rules subcommittee is missing from the county board rules. So if there are no objections, I would like to take a stab at drafting a couple of generic bullet points and bringing them back to the rules committee when we meet next time.
Okay. That might be a good time to mention this again before I turn it over to Ms. Rodriguez. We are going to allow any other changes to be brought forth, but we want to make sure that we have plenty of time to get that information to members. So when we set our next meeting, I'm going to say that we need to have any additions or new changes submitted 5 days before that meeting. So that lets you know that you have a little time to work on that. So, okay, Ms. Rodriguez, would you like to go now? I'm sorry, Member Erickson, you have a question?
I was just going to ask now, is that going to be 5 business days? Now, how are we going to count that? I mean, we really have got to get a definition on that.
Well, I'm going to say 5 business days.
That still doesn't solve it though. I mean, because like, are you saying that it has to, like if the meeting's on a Thursday, does that count as one of the 5th business day? Or does the day before count as the business day? I mean, I'm sorry to be a lawyer here, but we're going to have to put a definition on that at some point. So
The day of the meeting does not count, in my mind. The day of the meeting would not count, and you would not count a Saturday or a Sunday. So
obviously, what about the day of submission?
I would say that counts.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could make a suggestion, it's a lot easier. How about 5 o'clock 1 week before the meeting? So if we're meeting on a Thursday, have it 5 o'clock the Thursday before.
Did you all catch that?
That's 5 full business days.
All right. Well, so commanded.
Just requested.
All right. Okay. Now I'm going to again turn it over to Ms. Rodriguez for her to do her presentation.
Before I go, I want to make sure, remember Metzger, you had your hand up. Are you good?
Okay.
Okay, good. Well, the only other thing that administration wanted to bring forward, and it's real congruent with Chairman Soldner's recommendation to me to poll and talk to other county administrators about Member Johnston's recommendations and what other counties are doing in regards to budget hearings. Similarly, I actually had done quite a bit of research on how other counties in Illinois handle their county board rules. If you ever visit the office, and you haven't had a chance a lot in the last year to do that because of COVID, you might see staff and I walk around with the little rules book, and we have it with us kind of all the time. And why we do that is because, no offense to anyone who's worked on it before, it's hard to understand. You go to one section and it says one thing, and then you go to another section and it's seemingly contradictory. And so as part of our preparation for this meeting, we actually did sit down and do a couple of things. We made an Excel spreadsheet of all of the duties of each committee as they are codified in Chapter 20 to see if there's any inconsistencies or anything outdated. So I thank staff who worked on that, and we do apologize that the legislative subcommittee wasn't one of those, and we should write down its responsibilities and roles. But what we've also noticed is a bit of confusion sometimes, even for when and how department heads bring forth action items, especially personnel related. Do they go to one committee? Do they go to finance? And then finance happens to be smack in the middle of the week. And so sometimes if property and land use have personnel actions that require oversee by finance, either we have to make the hard choice of bringing those to finance ahead of bringing them to property and land use, or we have to make the property and land use people wait a whole month. Now, with that said, I am working on a proposal wherein we keep all of those things that need to be codified within Chapter 20, and that we pull a lot of the more Robert's Rules of Order and operational types of rules that are currently codified and move them to a rules committee and board approved operational manual. Many of our other county governments have done the same. And if you visit their rules online, you will find that the heavy hitter rules, like how many board members are there? How do you elect a board member after a vacancy? Even the reapportionment rules, those are in there, but that's it. They do not have the descriptions of what their committees do online and in their code, yet they still have a manual that is very robust with lots of exhibits of descriptions, and county administration wants to show you what that might look like next time, and give you plenty of time to review it for your consideration, that it may be something that would help us be more agile in the future And we feel it could help current members navigate all of the requirements of each committee, but also really help the new membership understand their roles and responsibilities, or the roles and responsibilities of a committee they do not sit on. And so I realize I don't have a document for you to look at. We were very poised to show you something, but suffice it to say, what we're intending to propose does not take away your authority. It would still be yours. County administration could not change any of those rules of order or operational parts of the manual without your vote. But we also feel that some of what's in code might be a little more operational than needing to be codified, right? And so in that sense, we're hoping to bring you something for your consideration only that makes us much more efficient, makes less mistakes, and brings things to the right place at the right time. And so Chairman Soldner, thank you for letting me bring that forward. It was actually his idea that I wait a bit because we had such a lengthy list to go over tonight, and I appreciate that. It also gives us a little more time to finish it up and show you a draft of it. So with that said, again, I know I don't have anything to give you, but if you cruise around some of the other county websites, my friends in Lake County, for example, gave me a great example of theirs, and that's where I got many of my ideas from, but many other counties are doing the same, and it's a lot easier for the membership and for staff. So thank you, Chairman. And if anyone has questions or concerns, I'm happy to entertain those.
Does administration have any other changes to make to this document?
We do have some recommendations about additions to decorum, not of board members, but of public speakers. That was something that I had been asked to do before this meeting, but we do not have any to bring forward tonight. We felt that the breadth of what was already submitted would be a lengthy discussion enough. And so at this time, Chairman, we do not have specifics, but what we do intend to do is show the membership in our draft operations manual what parts of this chapter 20 we would be changing. And so that was a difficult task because we were writing our operations manual in a slightly different way than this is written. So it's not apples and apples as we are trying to bring forth changes. But what we do intend to do, Chairman, is mitigate any of the places in this that are contradictory and really elaborate on the roles and responsibilities of each committee, take out some of the outdated sort of assignments that committees have inside Chapter 20. And those are the types of changes that we would make. I will say this, if the membership decides that they do not want to move towards an operations manual or a policy manual, as I've described, that is also okay. And we will be poised then at the next meeting as well to bring forth exactly what we would change in Chapter 20 to mitigate those particular issues that I just mentioned.
Okay. All right. Does any member of this committee have any other items to bring forward? Again, as I mentioned, we are going to allow a 1 week to prior to our next meeting to have any other rules changes. Member Erickson.
No, County Administrator Rodriguez is going through the rules and straightening out one inconsistent provision from another. Could you also go through the Illinois compiled statutes and do the same and see if you can straighten those out as well? I mean, I'm just saying while you're at it. I mean,
I'd be happy to. I have my master's in law, so I'll be good. Yep, it's good.
Just thought I'd suggest that.
Maybe we can get some suggestions in that, what needs to be changed.
This might need an extra month for that.
There you go, an extra month. Does any administration here have any other input or questions?
No, thank you.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to ask Julie to send out doodle poll or whatever to get another meeting scheduled. Hopefully not too far in the future. And technically, do we need a motion to adjourn, or can I just adjourn it?
Gonna adjourn it.
All right. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much for attending. See you next time.